welcome everybody. My name is Manisha Shah, and I'm with the National Renewable Energy Lab. March technical webinar in a series we're doing for the National Community Solar Partnership Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative.
Manisha, your audio is a little bit cutting out. I might cut your video and see if it improves.
So we'll talk about different ways.
Manisha, can you hear me?
Is there problems? Yeah, I can hear you, John.
Yeah, your audio is cutting in and out. I might cut your video and try again.
Okay, is that any better, Jeff? Otherwise, I'll call
It is better.
Oh, okay. No video then. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about portfolio screening approaches, so kind of getting to understand if solar could be a good option for the buildings in your portfolio. Some of the steps that we're going to walk through are the policy screening aspect of things, kind of understanding what the policy landscape looks like in your community where you have buildings. Then kind of walking through some resources that we have for understanding if there's good solar resources in your neighborhoods and locations. And then we have two NREL experts with us today, Emma Alquist and Nate Blair, and they're going to talk about some techno-economic analysis tools, Re-Up-Lite, SAM, and PV Watts, and teach you a little bit how to use those tools, although it'll be pretty high level. And then we're trying to reserve some time for some question and answer with the group. Before I move on, I also wanted to note that we have a new member for our collaborative. So I just wanted to note that National Housing Trust has joined us in the collaborative, and Ryan Moya, Carrie Fisher, and their colleague Andrew Martin are all joining the collaborative. And in the next meeting that we have in April, we'll work together to have them introduce themselves to the group. But I did want to note that that's an exciting development, and we're really excited for them to both join share their expertise with the group, and also learn from the rest of you all as well. And the last note I just wanted to make in terms of housekeeping is that we are recording this meeting today. We are only going to record up until the Q&A, and then we'll turn off the recording. But this is mostly so that folks that weren't able to join today can also learn from what we had to share with y'all. And then the last thing is, if you have any questions as we go along, please drop them in the chat. Tyler Orcutt, who's a new member of our TA team from NREL, she's going to be tracking the Q&A in the chat, and then we'll answer those questions after we go through the presentation. All right, so let's get to it. We'll go to the next slide here. So as I mentioned, there's a couple of different steps that we've kind of identified for the portfolio screening analysis. The first step is the policy screening. You're just mainly trying to understand what the policy environment looks like in the states or cities where you have properties. And we'll describe in more detail what we would recommend in terms of the questions you want to try to answer. And we'll be looking at the Desire website as one of the main sources of information there. Then we'll be walking through solar potential analysis. And so we've got some great geospatial tools that you can just type in your address or click on a map, and you can get a quick understanding of what the solar resource looks like in your census tract. And then we'll be walking through the techno-economic analysis tools that I mentioned today, Re-Up-Lite and System Advisor Model, which are both publicly available, and PV Watts. And then as you kind of walk through these public tools, then you might start to think about how you may want to do some deeper financial analysis for the sites where you want to do solar. And so we'll kind of review that with you as well. So we wanted to take a couple of poll questions really quickly, just to kind of understand the audience here. And so we have the menti.com website, and you can just pull that up on your cell phone or on another browser. And we have two questions here. So if you type in 983288, again, 983288, we'll go to the first poll question. And I'm going to reshare my screen. So the first question is, let us know which of these tools or websites that you're familiar with or that you've heard of before.
What do I do?
So you go to the website www.menti.com, and then you type in this code 983288, and you should be able to fill out the poll pretty quickly.
So I have to call up a different screen here. I'm not as okay.
Yeah, if you go to another website, if you pull up a web browser, Jim, you could just type in menti.com and then put in the code. So it looks like we have kind of a broad range of experience with the tools. A lot of folks have heard of PVWatts. A couple of people have heard of Desire, and then a couple of folks have not heard of any of these tools before. So that's really helpful information. Let's go to the next poll question. So the next question, same website, menti.com, and you type in the code 37966348. Which of the tools have you used? Okay, we got a few people saying they haven't used any of the tools. Okay, it looks like a couple of people have used PVWatts. Some familiarity with the Desire website. And oh wow, somebody's used Solar for All. Okay, that's great. Well, you can still, and Tyler, do you mind dropping these codes into the chat in case anybody was still trying to get on the website, and we can still record your poll responses. But I'm going to go back to the slides now. All right. Well, it's good to know. We just wanted to kind of understand your familiarity with some of the tools. So let's jump into the policy screening piece of this. So I think it's really important to kind of understand the policy landscape where you've got buildings and where you may want to do solar. This is a snapshot of part of the Desire website, and the URL is here on the slide. So there's 3 pieces of information that we thought would be good to kind of learn more about for the locations where you have buildings. The first is the regulatory landscape. So there are some different regulations in each and policies in each state and locale that are going to influence the financial viability and also just the ability to do solar or community solar with your multifamily buildings. Net metering or virtual net metering are some examples, the type of bill crediting approaches, what types of utility tariffs are available in your location. Also, does your utility offer consolidated billing? I know that's been a popular topic with our group. And then interconnection standards or green building codes. Another piece of information that's helpful to understand is what the federal financial incentives are. And these should be widespread and available to folks across the country. But there is information online about what they are. I think the most relevant one that we've been discussing is the investment tax credit. And then the last piece is, and this is where there's a lot of information online, is the state incentives. So there could be grants or funding for investment incentives, or when you buy the system. There could be production incentives for when you're producing electricity from your system, and different rebate programs. There's also solar renewable electricity credits and markets in different locations, and they can play a big role in the financial viability of your system. And then there's a couple of other options as well. And so the Desire website has a lot of really good information. It's not updated regularly, beyond maybe every 6 months. And so sometimes you do need to go and look at the websites for your state or your locale just to get the most up-to-date information, but it's a really great place to start. I'm going to turn it to Tyler, our new member of our TA team at NREL, to walk through an example for New York.
Yeah, hi everyone. So we did a policy search on Desire of New York State to pull examples of what you might find on your own policy screen. And I just wanted to highlight a few key policies that we pulled. So first, under state financial incentives in this lower box, New York offers a multifamily new construction program that provides financial and technical support for new construction or green rehabilitation of multifamily buildings. That does include the addition of solar and storage on the building. Second, arguably the most important piece of New York's financial incentive landscape is the value stack, or VDER legislation. This is the legislation that determines the dollar per kilowatt hour value that you'll see on utility bills in the form of virtual net metering. So that just determines how many cents per kilowatt hour you will get from solar production. So related to that, I also wanted to draw your attention to the regulatory landscape box at the top. We noted the community DG utility tariff filings. These are the regulatory side of the VDER legislation, and they tell you all the administrative pieces of the puzzle. So that includes how credits will appear on bills, any subscriber requirements, like how many subscribers you can have and how often you can change that list and how to do so if you so choose. They also include timelines for when you'll actually receive financial compensation post-solar production. So it usually doesn't happen immediately, and they'll have requirements for either next billing cycle, next 3 billing cycles, et cetera. So just as a general rule of thumb, it's important to check out utility tariff filings in any state that provides bill-based financial incentives, like virtual net metering. So if you have any questions about these programs or policy screening through Desire in general, let us know at the end of the webinar, and I'll hand it back to Monisha.
Thanks, Tyler. That was really helpful to learn more about what's happening in New York. So I'm going to move on to the next step, which is once you've kind of understood what the policy landscape looks like, you may also be interested in what the solar landscape looks like in the locations where you have buildings. One tool that NREL published in 2018 is called the Solar for All Open Carto tool. It's a web application and it's publicly available. You can use it today. And we also have the data sets that underlie this Open Carto tool if perchance you like to play around with GIS data sets. This tool it's sort of a mashup between several data sets on socio-demographic and market information, so including energy expenditures, demographics, heating and cooling degree days, public housing, low-income tax credit qualified census tracts. And so all of this information has been brought together with solar technical potential information, rooftop solar technical potential information. And you can go on the website and you can either type in your address, or you can also click on the map and look at a particular census tract or region. And in the map, you should be able to look at these types of information. So there's the solar rooftop technical potential, and you can look at it by income category. You can also look at it by the type of building, if it's single family or multifamily, as well as if it's renter occupied or owner occupied. And so you can look at those different types of buildings or income levels and understand what the generation potential might be for rooftops that are suitable at that county. They also calculated based on the energy expenditures that we know about for those different groups and categories by county from the American Community Survey that the census runs, what the energy expenditures are. And based on the energy expenditures, they've also calculated what the energy burden is. So that's the percent of your income that you're spending on energy bills for low-income households. And then also the percent of the electric generation that could be offset by solar. And so this is a really great tool. It's pretty easy to use. You know, you could probably type in the addresses of different buildings that you have or locations where you have buildings and get a really quick sense for where, you know, how a building in one state compares with a building in another state with respect to just solar resource data. And so this is not looking at any of the financial aspects of building out solar, but just gives you a sense for what the solar production potential might be in these different locations. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, as we move into the techno-economic analysis portion of the discussion, is just what are some of the financial considerations or types of data or even questions you want to be able to answer as you move into considering whether or not building out solar is economic for you. So one topic is some of the financial considerations. What type of subscription model might you be considering if you're planning on doing subscriptions? What types of bill crediting approaches are available to you? What the financial barriers you might have. I know that with some of the federal assistance programs that there are different financial barriers that we've been trying to tackle, but are still sort of grappling with and facing. What utility rates might look like and how the utility bills are paid. Is it paid by the building owner or by the tenants? Other types of considerations are also more organizational in terms of what would the tenant benefits look like? Are they direct and going directly to the utility bill? Who owns the building? Who may own the system, the solar system? And then, asset management. Are you doing that as part of, a leasing program, or will the third party take care of that for you, or do you need to do that in-house? And then there's also technical considerations. What does the metering look like in your building? Is it master metered or multi-metered? The electric load that you're trying to serve with the solar system, where's that located in your building? And then also, we've mostly been talking about rooftop, but there's also the opportunity to build offsite solar that could still serve the tenants of the multifamily affordable housing that buildings that you're in charge of. So these are some financial some considerations as you start to think about how to design your project and if it will be economic for you. So I'm going to turn it now to one of our NREL experts, Emma Elkvist, to talk more about some of the techno-economic tools that we have available for your use today.
Thanks, Manisha. Yeah, so maybe to take a little bit of a step back, I think in comparison to some of the tools and data layers described thus far, the three tools we'll be speaking about today are designed more for a specific project or a specific site. And so for any project or location, there's some general considerations and pieces of information that are used in these techno-economic models to help figure out, if the project economics are really there for various technologies. So that includes the solar, renewable energy resource, the cost of various technologies and incentives that may be available. But then also importantly, the goals of a given site or project, it may be to help just lower utility costs. We work with sites where net zero is a big goal, or lately a lot of specific sites that are hoping to survive utility grid outages for certain amounts of periods. And so how can distributed energy resources be helped there? And then thinking about the utility cost and consumption that you're going to be offsetting with these distributed energy projects. And finally, the financial parameters that impact the economics of the project. So we can move on to the next slide, which reiterates some of these same concepts, but shows on the left side here. Are you able to forward one, Manisha? Yeah, I'll keep talking. On the left side in orange are kind of the first or initial steps to modeling renewable energy technologies. So starting with weather data that's specific to your particular location. So for solar, it doesn't vary drastically from one building to the next, but for distributed wind, for example, there can be some significant differences within just a couple of miles. So important to consider that. And then the specifications of the particular system that you are modeling and efficiencies and adding on system losses to that. So the inputs on the left-hand side in orange here gives you the electricity production, but that's really only one side of the equation in trying to figure out the cost effectiveness or the economics of renewable energy technologies. So as I mentioned, you also need to have information about the cost of the technologies, the compensation or cost that you will be offsetting by installing these technologies, how you will be financing them. So there's lots of different ways to finance these that have specific and nuanced inputs, and then incentives available to lower those. And so when you take these two kind of technical and economic considerations and put them into one equation, it's what we called techno-economics, and that will give you results and kind of the metrics listed at the bottom. So you can get things like energy production and capacity factors, but more importantly for understanding the financial piece, things like LCOE, net present value, simple payback, and revenue generated. So I'm going to talk about one tool in particular that I'm most familiar with called Reopt Lite. You can go on to the next slide. It's a techno-economic optimization tool that integrates across multiple different technologies. It is it's been around for over 10 years, but has only been publicly available for a couple of years. So it sounds like most people on this call aren't familiar with the tool, so I'd encourage you to go check it out. Some of the kind of key questions that this tool helps answer, because it integrates across multiple technologies, is helping stakeholders figure out which renewable energy technologies or distributed energy technologies may be most suitable to meet a given goal at a site. So that includes solar, wind, conventional generation, the electric grid, as well as backup generators, energy storage, and then we recently added combined heat and power. And so the tool looks across all of those technology options, and then depending on the different goals, helps inform the technology mix, technology size, and how to operate or dispatch those technologies. And so it can be a good initial tool to kind of hone in on a set of technologies and kind of general sizes of technologies. So those are not inputs to the tool, rather they're outputs. You can go on to the next slide, please. Here is a quick look at the output to illustrate how the tool works. So you'll see the electric load at a site here in a thin black line that peaks during the day and drops at night down to about 15 megawatts. So this is a pretty large site. The site is installing PV in blue here, which offsets a lot of the area under this curve, which is the energy. And it's a little hard to see here with the colors, but in the late afternoon, the solar generation is starting to drop, but the load at the site is still quite high. And so here the model is opting to build a battery system that's discharged for just a couple of hours in the late evening. And by doing so, it's helping drop the demand charge here from 27 megawatts to about 23 megawatts. So this particular site has a demand charge that this battery is helping offset. And then there's also a time of use component to the electricity rate. And so later in the week, on this Thursday, it's shifting usage from the afternoon time to the morning time to take advantage of lower costs of electricity. And so the model could build bigger systems here to offset more cost, but that would come at a higher capital cost. And so it kind of considers the trade-offs between those two.
Am I frozen or is everyone else frozen?
Yeah,
No,
I think Emma froze.
Okay. I can just see if I can keep moving this forward. Okay, so this is a screenshot of the Reopt Lite web tool, and it offers a subset of the full Reopt model, which is a desktop tool that our NREL team can actually run. This is the financial mode. So what what you can do is size either PV or battery systems for your building based more on your financial needs and considerations. You can also run Riyadh Lite in a resilience mode. So in that case, you're considering more what your resilience needs or backup power needs might be, and you're optimizing and designing your PV and or battery based on those needs instead. And so this is the URL for the.
Hey, Manisha, I hate to interrupt you because you're doing a really good job. I'm back. I don't know what happened there. I could hear
Okay.
you just fine.
Okay, cool. I can either keep this on the slide or keep moving forward if you have additional information.
Let's keep moving because I think we are just up against the time, and maybe just show the outputs real quick. So as I mentioned, some of the key outputs of the tool includes the size of systems. So these are not inputs that the user has to enter. These are outputs based on your site characteristics. So we'll size PV and storage as well as other technologies. And then I will also provide that hourly dispatch. So how in an ideal or optimal scenario you would operate these technologies. And then it will give you kind of high level financial outputs. So annual cost of electricity, how much demand and how much energy you're offsetting, and what the expected net present value of the recommended technologies are.
And Emma, just two other points from the previous slide. Are you able to type in an address or a zip code of where your building is with Riyadh Lite? And what about your utility bill information or rates? Is that also another input that's you can also encourage?
Yeah. Yep. So you'll need to input your location for the resource data. That could be, you know, I could enter Golden, Colorado, for example, or I could enter my specific address. And then once you do that, it will pull resource data for the given location. And then it will also, based on a 25-mile radius, pull in utility rates from the utility rate database in a drop-down menu. And SAM has this functionality as well, where you can just select the name of the rate. So you don't need to go in and provide a ton of detailed information. There is an option to kind of create or build your own rate structure. But one nice feature of these tools is that you can just select the name of your rate and it will access that information programmatically for use in the models.
Cool, thank you.
And maybe one final thing I'll mention is that there is this web interface that's really easy to use and user-friendly, but you can also access the tool through an API, and that allows you to kind of script and evaluate instead of one site at a time, maybe 1,000 different sites. And so that's something we use a lot internally here at the lab to provide analysis for entities.
Well, thank you, Emma. That was a really great high-level overview of Riyadh Lite. And I'm going to turn it now to another seasoned NREL expert, Nate Blair, to talk about the system advisor model and PV watts.
Great, thank you, Manisha. Next slide. So there are two tools that are sort of in the same family and supported by our solar engineering and financial analysis team at NREL, PV Watts and SAM, and they're kind of two bookends of solar analysis, with PV Watts being on the simpler end, particularly in terms of inputs, and then SAM being at the other end in terms of both complexity and capability, and also the level of detail on the input side. And PV Watts in particular, I saw a number of people had tried it before, uses behind the scenes some of the same code and engines that the SAM tool does, but only requires 5 inputs to specify the system. It doesn't do any financial analysis, going back to the graphic that Emma was showing, and it doesn't do sizing. So you need to show up to it with kind of the size of system you'd want to have in that location, and it will give you an estimate. Next slide. So speaking of SAM, as I was saying, we have a lot of complexity, both on the technology side and on the financial side. So SAM at one point was called the Solar Advisor model, and then we changed it to system because we started adding a lot of additional technologies. Most recently, we added marine energy there. I've highlighted two pieces that I think or a couple spots where I think you're most likely to want to use this from a multifamily perspective. So on the technology side, it would be, so somehow PV didn't get highlighted there, but it would be PV with or without battery storage likely. And then on the financial side, it would be kind of our behind the meter residential, commercial, third-party ownership type financials, but also down there, host developer looks at something more akin to community solar, and I'll come back to that in a few slides. Next. So lots of people use SAM. We have something around 100,000 users. We've got a wide range of groups and organizations that use it. Since it's a free tool, free downloadable tool, we have a lot of students and academics that use it, lawmakers, utilities. One of the nice things about our tools is they're pretty agnostic in terms of technology, and we do our very best to spit out answers that are accurate. And so it's a lot of organizations like to have that as opposed to a tool produced by one of the parties to whatever the deal is. Developers and engineers looking at significantly larger systems. CSP and some of the other technologies that we have don't have any other software that really support those technologies to this degree. Next slide. And in SAM, I'd like to say we have a bunch of additional advanced analysis features. So parametrics, stochastic analysis, something called P50, P90, if you're familiar with that. Lots of scripting. SAM is open source, so you can actually take the code if you're a software person. We have Python wrappers and all kinds of other nice features. Probably not something that the initial user would get into because the desktop version is quite capable for a specific system of analysis. Next slide. And then the other, I think, key piece is that we really have detailed cash flow financial models, and coupled with detailed utility rates for behind the meter systems. I think both those together, along with the hour by hour analysis that we do, or sub-hourly analysis, can really provide the user with a lot of complex answers in terms of the impact of financing, the impact of incentives, the impact of some of these non-engineering issues, which are often more impactful than changes to, say, PV efficiency or other things. Next slide. Oh, and lastly, I wanted to say there are a number of models out there with fairly straightforward battery assumptions. And one of the things we've been working hard with in SAM, which may or may not be of use, is adding a number of different dispatch options to the battery, and then also really trying to capture the degradation of batteries. So as anyone who's ever had a cell phone knows, after some number of years, the battery starts to degrade and doesn't behave quite the same way. And at some point, it needs to be replaced or augmented, or additional battery capacity needs to be added, depending on the situation. And we really try to get into the weeds on that with SAM. For most users, they accept our kind of default assumptions about these degradations values, but it is there to play with if you have additional information. Next. So I have two slides here about community solar financial model, and this will is under development now, and this will come out in the next full release of SAM, which will be in the fall of 2021. Right now, one can look at a system with a particular buyer. So that could be a homeowner, it could be a commercial building owner, and what we're adding, particularly in the financial side, is how do we aggregate a number of buyers together, and how do we have both the system owner, subscribers, and the utility involved, and make sure we're passing that money around correctly. And so that's a piece that we're adding to SAM. Next slide. So there are a number of existing Excel models to evaluate cost and benefit from the owner side, the subscriber's perspective. We're working with Elevate Energy. We're working with North Carolina Clean Energy Center community solar model, looking at all of those, seeing how they've set things up, how they're organizing things in their models, and then adapting these models to SAM is the bulk of the effort, such that the SAM user can go in and select a number of subscribers and really calculate out what does that subscriber need to pay to make the system work, basically to make it cost effective, or not necessarily with a profit, but make sure that all the costs and revenues are balancing out for the system, and find out what the individual subscribers would need to pay, and perhaps several levels of subscriber from an anchor tenant to other subscribers. Next slide. We have a lot of help. SAM's, as I said, something that's going to take you a couple of days of investment, but you can do some of that with YouTube channel videos. We have done a lot of webinars and seminars. So if you just go to sam.nrel.gov, that'll lead you through to downloading the tool, and also some of the introductory videos, and then specific videos around different financial models, etc. So we've been around for about 15 years, and so we've built up quite a bit of support in those years. Next. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Nate. That was great. And SAM is definitely one of NREL's flagship models, as well as React Lite. So I'm really glad that we got a chance to get both the NPV Watts, all of those tools in front of you, including Solar for All, and also to speak about the Desire website and policy screening options today. So just again, kind of to walk through sort of what process you might undertake, and you don't necessarily need to do these things in this order, but it seems like these are some of the right steps to be taking to kind of understand which buildings in your portfolio and which locations in your portfolio might be the best opportunities for undertaking solar or community solar. So the policy screening aspect of things, understanding the policy and regulatory landscape, understanding what the solar technical potential might look like even before you get into the financial and techno-economic aspects, and then considering system sizing and also detailed engineering and financial analysis. So these are all publicly available, and we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of them. And we are working with a few of our members to pilot these approaches, especially for multifamily affordable housing. And we're hoping to summarize some of our learnings from that process by the end of this fiscal year in September, October timeframe, with some resources that we'll hopefully make publicly available as well, so that those of you that we're not working with directly in the one-on-one TA will also benefit from the learnings from your other peers in this collaborative. So with that, I wanted to do one last poll question. And so if you go back to the Menti website, the code is 2569827. And I'm just going to go to that website right now. We wanted to find out if any of you would be interested in training on this question or on any of these tools. And and we could, we're thinking about, could we do office hours? I know Nate and Emma have done more targeted trainings for different groups before. There's a lot of online publicly available resources already on the tools, but we could also tailor something more specifically for this group. So again, the website's menti.com and the code is 2569827. While you guys are looking at that, Tyler, I just wanted to ask, how are we doing in terms of questions, and are there some chat questions that we should maybe go through? Could also stop the recording at this point, and we can also open up the line, Jeff, for folks to be able to have more of a discussion in the last 13 minutes here.